everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week, while this is not technically a Magic story, it is Vorthos content, and so we try to do, Vorthos reviews, MTG story reviews, but we are here this week to review the Planeswalker's Guide to Strixhaven by Doug Beyer and Ari Zarolnik. And so, my quick review at the top of this is long, and it's not really a story, but it is extremely informative.
Yes.
So if you're interested in learning about the plane, this is your one-stop shop. This is definitely where you want to go. Just realize that it's got interesting information, but it can be a bit of a slog, in my opinion, to read through it. But if you have the time, I encourage you to do so that you'll learn more about the plane going forward. Because it's already told us some things that add context to even the two stories that we've already read. So, for that reason, I encourage. I don't know if you...
Yes, so there's definitely a lot of information. It's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
And helpful. So I do recommend reading it, even though there's a lot to it. There are also a lot of amazing pictures. So that'll kind of break up the monotony of reading it for you. If you think it's going to be hard to sit there and just read right through it. And there's a lot of amazing art.
Yes. A very, very good point. And it's also broken up into, very definable sections,
yes,
right? With different titles for those sections, etc. And it gets a bit... I don't want to say repetitive because that implies duplicative information, which is not correct, but repetitive in terms of when they talk about the 5 colleges, they do so in a rhythm, right? First we talk about this, then we talk about this, then we talk about this, then we go to the next college and we talk about the same 3 topics. So it gives you a little bit more freedom to say you know what, I'm going to stop here for now, I have to go do something else, yeah, but you'll know exactly
dinner, we'll have something to eat, right, then we'll come back to this.
But you will remember exactly where you left off because the sections are clearly defined, right, and you don't have to be oh, where was, what part was I at? Who are these characters in terms of a short story where if you stop and then come back, you might have to remind yourself of exactly what happened. This is not...
I don't remember right, what was actually happening because, I was doing something else for a little while.
Right. So feel free, if you have not read this yet, it is not, for whatever reason, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but for whatever reason, this... Planeswalker's Guide is not anywhere near the story page. I get it, it's not technically a story, but it's super hard to find this. So you're welcome. When we found it, it's actually, arguably you just Google Planeswalker's Guide to Strixhaven because you know that that's what it's called. But if you didn't know that that's what it's called, this came out on April Fool's Day and just came out. They talked about it a bit on social media, etc. the day of. But then that's it. So the whole time that you're on this plane, if you don't remember that they're called Planeswalker's Guide to blank, you would not know where this is. You just wouldn't unless you're scrolling through the daily MTG archive going back to April 1st, which would be tough. Good on you if you do. But I would not be doing that. And so... like I said, you're welcome. It is the top link in the description down below. Feel free to go check it out and read it for yourself. I guess there are spoilers. It's not a story, but if you want to take the time and read this for yourself to understand the plane and the things that are going on, we encourage you to do so because we're not going to be, we're just going to be talking about it. So, and we are not going to be exhaustively talking about it. So you will likely miss things and we're not going to be doing, like I said, an exhaustive job. So to get the full effect of it from the people who wrote it and wrote it for your consumption, please feel free to go read it for yourself, and then we would love it if you would come back here and join us so that you can give us your opinions, comparing, contrasting to ours, etc.
In the comments.
Yes, that's what the comments are for. Also, as a reminder, because we usually say this at the end, but here we are at the beginning, if you're not subscribed already, please feel free to do so. It doesn't hurt you in any way. It helps us out quite a bit. The more subscribers we have, the more stuff we're going to be able to do. That's just how YouTube works.
Yeah.
We are
unfortunately.
we are at a low number currently, but the well, I had the word and it's now completely gone out of my head. But the milestones. The milestones keep coming for us in terms of view counts on the channel. We are already at that threshold for monthly views, for total views, etc. So with subscribers, that'll help out a lot. And then if you want to know when all of our stuff comes out, don't forget to ring that bell as well. Exactly. We really appreciate it, and if you want to see our stuff, it helps you out as well. Yeah. We have other channels down in the description box too. It's all up to you. But if you're here for this, thank you so much for being here. Let's get on to the full review itself. So, last time, and by last time I mean in Kaldheim, I referenced, because we did the Planeswalker's Guide like last.
Yeah.
And I was upset because I mentioned that when we were reading one of the earlier Kaldheim stories, at least I, but you to a degree as well, it was just really me, was sitting there going, what is happening?
Right.
Who are these groups of people? Why are these groups of people? Why are they feuding? Are they always feuding? Are they just upset with each other here, but otherwise they're usually cool? Like, how does this all work?
Right.
And reading the Planeswalker's Guide really explained that. But the same way that they did it here, and it's a little upsetting to me, is that 2 stories came out before the Planeswalker's Guide did. So, and like I said, this Planeswalker's Guide...
the location of it is nowhere near where the stories
right,
are.
it's just a regular article that was released and, you know, tweeted about and Facebooked about or whatever, but...
As opposed to them, like, releasing the Planeswalker's Guide first and saying, look, guys, we're going to put this everywhere we can so that you can read about the plane before you start these stories, so that you know what the heck we're talking about. And
because, interestingly, at the end of the Planeswalker's Guide, it does direct you to mtgstory.com. It says, hey, you want to learn more about the plane? Here's the stories. Well, guess what? That implies that you want people to read the Planeswalker's Guide and then read the stories. Right. It just makes sense. But if you hide the Planeswalker's Guide away, it's just frustrating. Maybe I'm the only one that feels this way. I don't really know. But, like, it's just... like,
I agree, it's dumb.
Yeah, it's odd to me, right? Because I feel like it gives so much context. I mean, again, we read 2 stories, which we reviewed last week. If you missed it, maybe you can click that iCard up in the top corner to go check out our review last week of the first 2 stories for Strixhaven, the actual main stories. We'll get to the side stories next week, but we'll talk about that later as well. But we talked about those last week, and one of the things that you had a bit of an issue with, it wasn't like egregious, but something that you talked about when we were reading it was the lanterns in the forest.
Yeah.
Right, or the torches or whatever.
The, like, light posts.
Right, but the, like, ever-burning torches that, I think it was Will, brings up to Kasmina, and he's like, how do these burn? And she's like, it's magic. And then they just move on. And it's like... and it's like such a weird cop-out answer. Or at least it feels that way. You read the Planeswalker's Guide, that innocuous thing that they talk about is beautifully described in the Planeswalker's Guide. It's described as to why that is the case. It makes sense. All of those lights and torches lead from outside, way outside of the school, and lead to the school, and all of them converge from all their different locations at the Biblioplex, the center of knowledge, and it's supposed to, like, symbolize lighting your way to knowledge, right? Like, getting you ready and aware that you're going to a place of knowledge and importance. That's incredible.
And guiding you there as opposed to allowing you to get lost.
And that's just so cool.
Yeah.
It's just so well done. But then why did we get the opportunity?
The story referenced it so loosely.
Yeah.
And didn't explain it. So if you never read that Planeswalker's Guide, you'd just be like, well, that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Moving on, then.
Yeah. So, again, I don't technically know, or sorry, that's not fair. I can't definitively know until we've read all of the stories, but I already, having read this Planeswalker's Guide, feel like I'm in a better position in this new plane that we are on and this new location of this school I already feel like I'm more prepared for when we read the stories to have context for any and all things that might come up. And I have not memorized it. We read it through once, but all of these things.
And as we said, there's a lot of information.
We'll get to it. Good Lord, there's a lot. But it just made sense to me. Like, being able to read this first seems like the way to go, so that you have context for those things. Because, I don't know, I'd rather have that knowledge in my back pocket than have to read about it, think that it's dumb first, the torches thing, and then read about it later and go, oh, it's not dumb, it's so cool. Like,
because then you don't get to enjoy the story when you're reading the story.
Right.
You have to enjoy it after you've already read it, reviewed it, and then also read this Planeswalker's Guide.
Right. And so when we get into the specifics of attending the school or being an attendee of the school, we talk about something that we heard about in the other stories as well, which is that first years wear just a generic uniform. And then once they are done with their first year of study, they then pick one of the 5 colleges, and then they wear that college's attire. And again, in the Planeswalker's Guide, as Amy mentioned, the beautiful artwork shows you mock-ups of the clothing that they would typically wear, both the first years and the individual colleges, which is super well done.
Yes.
They describe the clothing and why they wear those particular types of outfits. And the inspirations behind them, which is great, because I'm not as big into fashion as you are, but I still enjoyed looking at them, but the descriptions were really good as well in terms of the inspirations behind the outfits and the reasons behind.
And of course that really helps the artists when they're trying to have some level of cohesion among all these different pieces of art that they're doing. And they're able to say, okay, these are the elements I need to include in a specific uniform for such and such college. And then, this artist, that artist over there, and that one over there, we're all able to create outfits without being told this is exactly what it needs to look like, and still have it make sense, be cohesive, and look the way the people who planned out each of these colleges wanted them to look.
Yeah. I'll probably say it 10 more times in this video alone, but that deserves props to the world builders.
Right.
And I encourage you.
It's a level of detail that is, I would say, could be at certain instances somewhat overlooked.
Yes, and I do truly appreciate that at the bottom of this Planeswalker's Guide there were actual credits given to the people that made this what it is. Okay. We read this and it was so detailed, and it gave appropriate shout outs to the right people. And so that was great. I really appreciated that. Something that I found interesting, I mean, it's a fantasy world, but at the same time, Wizards has in the past done, the story team in the past has had situations where they have had the idealized version of things that can relate to the real world, as well as the reality of things that can relate to the real world. This was one, not necessarily that hit close to home. I, thankfully, knock on wood, had a pretty good relationship with my college advisors when I went to college. But they do talk about your mentor or your advisor here, and they mention how every student gets 2 mentors or advisors, one for each color of the school that they're going to. So if you go to Lorehold, you get 1 white mage and 1 red mage that are in charge of helping you find a direction in terms of how you want to progress with your studies. And some students may end up...
They're always at odds with each other.
Right. And so some students may end up heavily white-leaning, some students may end up heavily red-leaning, and obviously this relates to every college. I'm using Lorehold as an example here. Or they could be like more closely down the middle and take inspirations from a little bit of both. But those advisors are supposed to help you. But they mentioned multiple times in this Planeswalker's Guide that the advisors are actively against one another often,
right.
as you just brought up. Like, that sucks.
Right.
Because you just, at least, again, here in the real world, or at least here in the Northeast US, that's where my knowledge base comes from, is from going to college here in the Northeastern United States. If your experience is different, I would love to hear it, as always, because getting more context is even better. But what I'll say for myself is, you're an impressionable kid. Yeah. Like, you're coming out of high school, right? And you're supposed to be an adult, and that's cool, but you're also not. And, like, you're coming up to an adult who is supposed to be able to tell you what they recommend for you to do with your studies, right? What's the best path for you to travel to do what you want to do with your life, if you even know yet what you want to do with your life when you first show up to college. But I remember, for example, I guess I'll use a personal example. When I got to college, I had an advisor who was a language-based advisor. And I had started thinking I was going to study Spanish. That changed drastically, but I still minored in it, so, you know, whatever. But my advisor, because I said that I was going to go in the direction of language, basically, they gave me an advisor who worked in the language department. But it was a German advisor. And so when I sat down and met with her, what she said to me, like one of the first things that she said was, you know, it's great that you want to study Spanish, but, you know, I recommend to my students who are studying other forms of language that you should study other languages as well as Spanish. And maybe there are folks out there, again, I only minored in it, maybe there are folks out there who teach different languages who would agree with that type of a statement. For me, I was in no way interested in that at all. But it seemed to me like it was a super biased account from a professor who taught a lesser studied language. And again, that is
trying to get like seats filled.
And that is no knock on German, either the teaching the language whatsoever. It was not my level of interest. That is all.
Right.
And so I say lesser, meaning that less students were enrolled in that language class than in Spanish. And that is purely numbers. Again, it has nothing, I'm in no way trying to badmouth it at all. So please don't misunderstand. But it felt like Amy said. I fully agree. That's exactly what it felt like. It felt like, well, take my class as well.
Right.
It's like, why are you my advisor? This is not helpful to me.
You shouldn't be an advisor if that's what you're going to do.
And
because you're not advising people. You're just convincing them to take your class because you need seats filled.
Right. You're like petitioning or campaigning, right? So I was a little frustrated by that, but when I read this part of the Planeswalker's Guide, it brought me back to that, of being like, oh my god, could you imagine not one but two advisors doing that to you, being fully biased towards what they want you to do, as opposed to what, God forbid, you want to do? Because when I got a good advisor, and God knows I did, I had two pretty good advisors, as I then found a Spanish advisor, and then later when I moved away from Spanish, found a good advisor in another direction, they talked me through what I wanted to do. So when I said, I want to ultimately end up here, they were like, okay, well, here are the recommended pathways to get there, and here are the classes that you would need to take. When do you want to take them? And that was exactly what I needed, exactly what I wanted. So again, a little bit of a personal story. I hope that's okay for everybody. But it made me cringe hard when they kept talking about, like, contradictory advisors. They're always at odds with one another. It's like, these are kids, you know what I mean? Like, they're not, but they are. So, like, don't put all of your bullshit on them.
Right.
That bothered me a lot.
That's not what responsible adults do.
Right. If you're an advisor, if you're a mentor, you're there to help. You're there to listen, take in their needs, and provide your expertise and your wisdom. And if you don't know where they're supposed to look, if you don't know the answer to their query, you know who to ask to look it up, right? If you're in Lorehold and they have a Witherbloom-esque question or a Witherbloom-related question, you should be able to point them in the direction of a Witherbloom person who can answer that question. But if
I want to be in Lorehold and Witherbloom.
But if you are so stubborn that Witherbloom is not an acceptable college to fraternize with, then you might not do that. And then you're not doing your proper duty as a good advisor or mentor. I'll get off my soapbox now. That was what I had to say about that. Don't do that. Yeah. Don't do those things. That sucks.
When I went to college, I went to a community college, and they didn't have advisors. They had people
I remember this.
who sat in a very large room and at desks pretending to be advisors. So as you walked in and sat down with them and created your schedule, they helped you create your schedule. I ended up taking a class that didn't give credits. And I ended up taking a class that was supposed to go towards my business major, but didn't actually count towards that because they were unaware that even though it was a business class, it didn't count towards the business major.
Yep.
So yes.
So if you are an advisor out there, be a good one.
Yeah.
And
stop sucking.
And that's not just for colleges. If you're a mentor, if you're anything like that, just be good. Listen and be what that young, impressionable person needs, because they are a young and impressionable person. And so they're going to trust you. And if you don't know what you're talking about, tell them that. It's okay. It's okay to be like, you know what? I'm not really sure, but let's work on finding out together. That's a lot better than just being like, I think it's this. Let me just tell them this. And then if you're wrong, they're the one that's screwed, because if you never see them again, then they're the one that has to fight through all that nonsense. So,
right. The other thing is, like, I mean, I guess that's kind of like the point in your life around that age where you need to, if you don't already know, you need to know now that, you know, the world isn't what you think it is when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you listen to adults and you think that what they say is just true, right? As opposed to what they think. You think it's just true because you're like, well, they're an adult, so they must know. But, you know, as you get older, you need to learn that, you know, adults are just the same as kids. They're just, you know, a little bit more experienced than kids.
In some things.
Right. So they're just trying to get through life. Yeah. Trying their hardest to do things right, despite not necessarily having a goddamn clue of how to.
Mm-hmm. And so, with all of that being said, we would love any and all opinions that you might have, or other stories that you may have encountered, etc. Down in those comments, we would love to read any and all of those. The Planeswalker's Guide then moves on to the individual colleges and discussing the individual colleges. Like I said, there's a lot of detail here which we're not going to get into, and we encourage you to go read it, top link in the description. But for Silver Quill, I saw a lot of discussion. I don't know if it was specifically following this article being released or if it was from one of the stories that we may not have read or reviewed yet, but talked about the fact that Silver Quill, many people thought it was like, cool poets and talkers and etc. And orators, but reading through some of the material that's been written about Silver Quill, it seems like, and this is other people's opinions that I'm kind of paraphrasing and condensing, but that they felt like it was a school of mean girls and ROTC students, or ROTC recruits. And I can definitely see the mean girls aspect of things, right? In terms of talking about like...
Wait, the ROTC was Silver Quill?
Correct.
Oh.
Because it was the... we'll get there.
Okay.
But the mean girls aspect I see. I get it. At least from this. Because they talk about the fact that you have mages or mage types who are orators in such a way that in their battling style, they talk you down. They find something that you are self-conscious about, and they target in on that as a way to beat you down and distract you and beat you. And that's their type of magic, is to be able to assault you that way.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like magic. That just sounds like manipulation.
Well, and it's probably a little bit of
I guess why
both.
people were upset about it.
Yeah. And so, but the ROTC thing, I don't know. Again, from my reading of just the Planeswalker's Guide, I didn't see it. I saw that they discussed, did I write it down? They discussed training for dancing and martial arts and etc. There's an area that allows for the Silver Quill to train in that way. But it talked about training for dance and training for martial arts and etc. But based on what they described Silver Quill as being, that made perfect sense to me. I have never been a dancer. Actually, that's not entirely fair. I danced on stage for plays. Mm-hmm. I would in no way consider myself anywhere near professional, but we took the time in that dance studio for a full day, practicing our routines step by step by step, chaining it all together, and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And then
it sounds exhausting.
And then, of course...
especially when it's not something you're used to doing.
Right. And then, of course, repeating that dance as you practice it on stage itself, and it's athletically demanding, and it's about breath control, because you're also singing at the same time, at least for theater. And so it was intensive. And so to have a training space for dancers, again, I've never been a ballet dancer or a ballerina, but I am
a lot of fucking work.
I am aware of the fact that there's a reason why I've never been those things, and it's because I don't have the discipline for it. I definitely don't have the figure for it. And I never trained like that, because that's training, right? You have to be disciplined. You have to, if you're a dancer in that way, that the dancing that you're doing dictates your exercise regimen. It dictates your diet. It dictates your leisure time. It dictates probably the way that, like, the direction and the way that you sleep and etc., so that you're not straining your muscles overnight. Like, there's so much that goes into it that when I read that they had a training facility, I didn't think ROTC. I thought, yeah, that's some intensive training for some dancing. Like, it just makes sense that you need to be that poised to be in that type of performance. So, again, if that is where the frustration lay for folks, was from reading this, I don't see it. If it's from another story, then we'll cover it when we get there. But that aspect of things, the ROTC aspect of things, I didn't see. I also saw some people saying that they didn't think it made sense for a school that reads as a liberal arts college to have ROTC. I was never a member of ROTC, but as a person who went to a liberal arts college with an ROTC program, I can tell you it's 100% done.
Yeah.
I saw it, and there are different opinions that people have about ROTC in general, and that's fine. If that's something that you want to post, you're more than welcome to do so in the comments, because we want to hear from anybody and everybody. But I will say that I have absolutely seen ROTC programs at liberal arts colleges. That's just, it's absolutely something I've seen. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all, or if we should just...
No,
okay.
I have absolutely nothing to say to that.
You got it.
Less than nothing.
Then when we talk, let's talk about Prismari. Because I have a separate sheet of paper here that I wrote on. Because again, I'm giving I said I was going to do it at least more than once, but I'm giving a shout out to the world builders. One thing, as a very, 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 very amateur dungeon master that I have come up with as an issue, is naming things in a fantasy environment sucks. And whether that is titles or actual names, like first and last names. And so when we read through these, something that stuck out to me was each of these 5 colleges have 2 different colors, and they talk about the dichotomy between those 2 colors. That's the different sections in this talk about those dichotomies. And it lists what red mages or blue mages would do in Prismari. It lists what white or black would do in Silverquill, etc., etc. And it lists the different types of those mages. And when we read through Prismari, I remember you commenting, because, you know, I had to do it in... If I did it in one breath, it was like impressively in one breath. I listed all of the different elements that were available to be used by the Prismari students, right? Because it's not just, you know, it's not the elements that you would typically think of. It's not Avatar The Last Airbender, where it's just the 4 elements. It's not Captain Planet, where it's the 5 elements. It's not any of those, right? It's not Magic the Gathering, where it's the 5 elements. There's so many that they listed in terms of, like, there's ice and water, there's ground and stone, right? Like, it's like, there's like all these different things. And so because of that, it made sense to me that up until the Lorehold, Prismari had the most variance in terms of the different kinds of mage that you could be.
Right.
As a Prismari student.
Like specialty that you could have.
Yes. And so I'm going to do this because they did it, and I want to shout it out. They give a lot more detail in the Planeswalker's Guide. So if you want context for any of these, that's where you want to go for that. But I'm going to give you the names that they wrote down, or that they gave and made up. Because most of these are made up. Not all of them are, but most are. That they wrote for the different mages for the different colleges. So for Silverquill, for white, Inkrights, Glyph Weavers, Quillmancers, Warsingers, Silvertongues, Battle Poets, Vainglories, Honormancers, Scorn Mages, and Lumimancers. Okay, that's 10 for white in Silverquill. For black in Silverquill, Banter Mages, Shadelocks, which is hilarious, Witslingers, Daunters, Inkcasters, Dusk Mages, and Shade Wings. So that's only 7. So this is not a perfectly mirrored thing, which I thought was interesting. I'm sure that would have been a lot more restrictive for them if they were like, okay, well, we made 10 white mage types in Silverquill, so every color of every mage in every school needs to have that many options.
Or we need to get rid of some in this one if we can't end up with 10 and all the rest.
Exactly. So Silverquill has 17 different mage types across the 2 schools, and I can imagine, because they mentioned that some students leave with bits of each, that there could even be further combinations from there. But that's not what was listed. Then we get to Prismari. Hold on to your damn socks.
Well, I just kind of thought of it as like doctors gaining specialties. Like, a doctor can be like a general practitioner, but also have specialties in like internal medicine or
pediatrics, etc.
Yeah,
sure.
And you could do both of those. So you could be a general practitioner and also have 2 specialties in pediatrics and internal medicine.
Sure, but I'm just saying those all have titles.
Right.
So
these all have titles. I'm just saying, like, the combination of those titles doesn't need its own
That's a good point.
title. It's just you.
You're absolutely right.
Like,
absolutely.
it's just the person.
No, you're right. That's a really good analogy. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So yes, Prismari is a lot. So for blue mages, there are 15 types of blue mages. Cloud Conjurers, Mist Mages, Zephyrists, Skybrushers, Vortex Virtuosos, Waterbinders, Ice Sculptors, Hue Splashers, Aesthemancers, Compositionists, Splendor Diviners, Vistamancers, Opusmancers, Master Creators, and Avant-Guardians, which is great. Nicely done. Avant-Guardians, super good. Red, because that was only the blue side of Prismari. Here's the red side. Geosculptors, Flame Shouters, Lava Mavens, Ember Brushes, Stonebenders, Electro Visionaries, Storm Painters, Spectacle Mages, Wonder Workers, Heart Ragers, Muse Channelers, Rule Burners, Blast Innovators. Wow. Prismari, so Silver Quill I said had 17, Prismari had 28. 15 blue, 13 red. So slightly less red. But still.
Yeah.
We'll move on to Witherbloom, and then we can talk more about that stuff in here. For Witherbloom, Black Mages from Witherbloom. Ritualists, Bleed Doctors, Pest Catchers, Dissectors, Vein Witches, Banelocks, Cauldron Weirds, Blood Stirrers, Skullmancers, Dreadbones, and other Necromancers, is how they listed that. For green mages, you have Herbalists, Boon Witches, Leaf Binders, Earth Crouchers, Mud Masks, Bayou Druids, Bow Callers, Trudge Gardeners, and Pest Wardens.
Sorry, that one's just my favorite.
Amy really liked the Bayou
and
Druids.
Pest Wardens.
And Pest Wardens. Because, and that's what I have written down here, for Witherbloom, for those of you who watch our streams, whether it is when we are lucky enough, and we have nothing to announce in this regard yet, but if we are lucky enough to be part of early access streams, or when we are just streaming MTG Arena every Monday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. But Amy loves and finds that there are just random creatures that Amy finds to be adorable. And I affectionately refer to them as Amy's cuties, because Amy refers to them as cute all the time. And sometimes they are not cute, at least to me.
They are.
Okay, yes they are. I'm so sorry. And so speaking of which, the Amy's cuties that may not be cuties to you in this set are the Pests from Witherbloom.
Yes.
Amy loves them so much. And I wrote down the quote from the Witherbloom section where they talked about the pests. The quote is, "They are disagreeable, hissing, spiky, untrainable monsters that bite without hesitation."
But I love them.
And
Cute.
and appropriately, it does say following that Witherbloom students wait on them hand and foot as if they were pets, despite all of that. So, if you were curious why Amy just said earlier that she wants to be a Lorehold and a Witherbloom, that's the Witherbloom side of things, if you were curious. So good. Super good.
One of the pictures of the ones in the Planeswalker guide was so cute. Like, I just legitimately want to have that as a pet, but it doesn't exist. But if it did, it would be my pet.
So, if we can get a card with a pest on it that looks a little bit like that at all, you better believe, when we do our openings, which will be coming out as soon as I can get my pre-release packs, when we do those openings, I will make sure, don't you worry out there, folks, I will make sure that Amy gets as many of those pests as I can find. So, let's move on to Amy's other college of choice, Lorehold. Lorehold Red Mages are Cliffbusters, Ruin Shamans, Chaos Scholars, Trivialists, Absurdophiles, Warlords, Dust Speakers, Hero Scorns, Scroll Bashers, and Tome Wielders. And the white mages for Lorehold, buckle up, Antiquarians, Truth Finders, Archaeoscribes, Relic Readers, Aeon Mancers, Monument Priests, Iconologists, Past Raisers, Ghost Advocates, Battle Mediums, Spiritualists, Conservators, Past Quotes, Docents, Curators, Honor Bringers, Allusionists, Rule Citers, and Canonists. There are 29 total mage types from Lorehold, which is the record for the record holder for the most. There are 10 red and
Yeah, because history kids are the best.
and 19 white. That is the largest of all of them by far, is 19 white for Lorehold. And then the total for Lorehold is also the largest at 29. Then we move on to the best college. The Planeswalker's Guide even saved the best for last. So that's all I'm saying on that. Quandrix.
No, they just dumped it at the end.
It actually, no, I don't think that's true. But it is the one with the lowest number of mage types. So maybe they spent the least amount of time on it, or maybe Quandrix is just so very simple because there are Quandrix mages out there that, you know, it was just easy to make these names up. So you have Vivifiers, oh sorry, this is green, for the green side of Quandrix, Vivifiers, Zoetomancers, Figurists, Augmenters, Scale Druids, and Mana Scholars. And then for blue, you have Abstractors, Proof Spinners, Spiralmancers, Fractalologists. I knew that one was going to mess me up. Echonosts, Sequence Prophets, Metamancers, Phenomenologists, best name ever.
I love that one.
And Void Theorists. With Lorehold, though, I kind of wanted to talk about something that you brought up, and I think is a valid thing to talk about.
Okay.
When they talked about Chaos Scholars, Trivialists, and Absurdophiles, which are red mages under Lorehold, they mention that they are, I wrote this down, that those types of mages chase down anecdotes of history as a ridiculous litany of chance happenstance. It seemed like it was like calling them crackpots. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, and conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Which, I guess, I don't know that that's like what they were going for. Maybe it is. Maybe I shouldn't have read it that way. But you, like, in general, when we read that, you were like, I don't like that. Like, and I agree with you. It seems like rude. It seems like that's not what they wanted to go with, but that's what they went with. It was so odd to me. Mm-hmm. So I don't fully understand why.
Yeah, maybe they just need to, like, explain that a little bit more. Like, maybe we're just not understanding it.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, conspiracy theorists, or, like, maybe, like, trying to, like, disprove or prove whether something is or is not accurate, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I feel like if that's what they were trying to say, they didn't do a great job of conveying that.
Sure. So if you have opinions on what that could mean, and it's not a negative thing, and you want to let us know why it's not a negative thing, we would love to hear that as well. So that was all the different schools and stuff. One of the things I wanted to talk about was Mage Tower. They talk about Mage Tower. Yes, you could joke and say that it's similar to Quidditch. It's really just capture the flag, right? It's just capture the flag. It's an idea of Quidditch. That one's tough. I think I'm about 50-50 on it. There are times where I look at it and I'm like, so it's just Quidditch. And that sucks because, as we talked about last week, Wizards should be trying to distance themselves from the Harry Potter references these days for obvious reasons. And if you're unaware of why, congratulations and or look it up.
Right.
But in terms of this game, like, college sports is just a thing, typically.
Right.
So, like, the fact that this game exists and it's just a big game of capture the flag, I think is fine. I think it's kind of cool. And so, like I said, I'm about 50-50. There are times where I'm like, it's just Quidditch. It's absolutely Quidditch. And other times I'm like, it's capture the flag. It's not that similar, so, like, maybe not. But what I found interesting is that it involves the mascots. Each school has a mascot, and your job is to go and steal one of the other team's mascots from the top of their tower and bring it to yours. It's capture the flag. But looking at these mascots or hearing about these mascots, there are, like, you have to know that there are certain mascots that are better to go for. Right? Like, it didn't mention if you're allowed to, like, wear gloves when going after pests, for example. Right? Because, like, if they bite you and you have gloves on, who the hell cares?
Or, like, a big, like, forceps thing where you can just, like, grab them and not
Walk
get
them around.
stabbed or bitten.
Yeah.
And then, you know.
But I had some questions. Fractals in the picture, that fractal looked pointy as crap. How the hell are you going to pick a fractal up and not be just full of holes afterwards?
How are you going to pick up a statue with a swirling spirit inside of it?
I had
like, it just doesn't
I have
make
it there.
sense.
Unless it's like a bust. Like, you can carry a bust, right? But how do you carry an elemental? It's got a construct around it and then fire inside of it. How do you carry around metal surrounding fire? I don't understand.
You're supposed to use magic.
And it does say that magic that won't harm other things is permitted. So maybe you just use like a levitation spell and you're just like, okay, I'm carrying it now. Sure, maybe.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Yeah.
Why not? We already got Quidditch.
But that's why, like, I don't know. It's just like...
Yeah, it seemed really dumb.
It's weird.
Like they only created this game so that they could have mascots for each of the schools.
But the mascots are pretty cool. I'll give you that.
They're
I love them.
freaking awesome.
Yeah, I love them.
But I feel like they could have just done that. I don't think that they needed to, like, incorporate it into this game.
Yeah.
That's very Quidditch-esque and, like, not necessarily that creative. Because the mascots themselves are very creative.
Yeah. They're
Insanely
really cool.
creative. Yeah. Just, like, allow them to represent each school. Like, I think that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they needed to do the whole Quidditch thing.
Yeah.
I don't think they needed to. But that's my opinion.
Speaking of things they may not have needed to do, this topic makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but I want to talk about it. Because I think it warrants talking about. The Auric. Right? We learned about the Auric last week when we reviewed those two stories. And we learned about the fact that they seem to be the bad guy organization for this set.
The mob.
But one of the things that they discuss in this is the Auric. And they talk about, with the Auric, they talk about the recruiting practices of the Auric. That bothers me a lot. So I want to touch on it, but I don't want to dwell on it. But I do want opinions if people have them down in the comments. Please don't, just because I said it makes me uncomfortable, please feel free to continue the conversation. I would still love to hear, and then we can communicate back with you or with your fellow commenters. You can do that, whatever you choose. But I don't want you to feel, because I say it makes me uncomfortable, that you can't talk about it. I want you to be able to talk about it. That's why I bring it up at all.
Right.
The thing that not frustrates me, the thing that makes me uncomfortable is that the Auric recruiting process just feels like a lot of real-world recruiting processes that are deeply troubling.
Right.
Like, deeply troubling.
Sex trafficking, gangs,
cults. Like, the part that bothered me was, like, where they said, I mean, it's, again, this is all real life. This absolutely happens in real life.
Yeah.
Right? The thing that bothered me, I think, was when they were like, students don't even know that they're being groomed, but they're being groomed to be recruited, and then eventually it just gets to a point where they're offered the mask, right? And then once they put that mask on, you're an Auric.
Right.
That sucks.
Yeah, terrorist organizations. Yeah.
It's rough. So that's...
Like you said, it's...
real.
It's the real world.
And that's, I wrote, Auric recruiting, uncomfortable, but real. Like, it's 100% a real thing that happens, and so them referencing it here is good. I think it makes sense. It sucks that it has to be referenced, but the fact that it's a real thing and they're talking about it is cool, and I appreciate it for that. So, if you have opinions on it, if you think it shouldn't have been done, if you think that it wasn't done well, if you think that it's not a good enough analogy to real-world situations, any and all thoughts, as always, give us those. We want to hear.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe we wait and see. When we read more of the main stories that have referenced them already, and we just kind of see what happens to them. Because maybe there's this elaborate storyline of how all the teachers or all the dragons or whomever is able to like infiltrate them and defeat the whole of the Auric.
Well, and don't forget, I mean, Luca is kind of trying to do that, it seems, to a degree. I mean, he doesn't fully know, but kind of. But also, I wanted to I mean, it reminds me of, I actually, I have it written down right in front of me. I'm like, I have it written in my notes, but I don't have my notes. Yes, I do, you dummy. Taver, from last week's review. Taver from main story number 2, Lessons. Taver was one of the Auric. And he was the one who is in the tunnels under the Biblioplex. And he gets to that moment that I loved, that we talked about, where he's like, this sucks. Why am I risking my life for this?
Right.
And so it's nice to see that you can be unbrainwashed a little bit. It sucks that it would have to get to that point, to that degree of like, she almost killed me. I don't want to do this anymore, right?
And it's not, I'm stopping working for this organization. It's, I'm not doing this one thing because it was detrimental when I attempted to do it already.
I mean, maybe, but that's still like the wake-up moment. Like, that could absolutely be his moment of like, nope, I'm done now. This sucks. Everything sucks. I'm gone.
I guess we didn't really get to see like whatever happens to him and stuff.
So there was
but
that.
He didn't sit there very decisively and go,
"No,
I shall never do this again."
No. But yeah, and we're not through yet, which is why, right? So there's that, and then to kind of overarchingly talk, unless you had anything more specific to mention.
My gosh.
This was a lot of information.
There's so much specificity to this.
I don't know how well you can see this. This is the notes of just the mages. Just the names of the mages. It was huge. It took up this whole page, both sides.
And that's not any description of what any of them were.
No.
Just the names of them.
Right, and that's in the Planeswalker's Guide, so I encourage you to check that out. But if you watched last week's video, you may recall that what I said was that this week would be side stories 1 and 2, and next week would be main stories 3 and 4, and then the week after would be side stories 3 and 4, and etc., etc., etc. But then last week we didn't get a side story.
Nope.
Okay, I guess that makes sense, because it was like Good Friday, maybe? So you didn't put out a story on Good Friday? I don't know. But sure. Or because you put out this Planeswalker's Guide, but then why didn't you do it first, and why isn't it on mtgstory.com? I'm being a little snarky on purpose. But my main point is, hey, we didn't do what we said we were going to do, because they didn't do what we assumed they were going to do. So
what we were kind of told they were going to do.
So here is my assumption for what we are going to do next week. Next week, I would like to do Side Stories 1 and 2. Because Side Story 1 has been out for a bit now. And so I'd like to be able to actually review it. Side Story 2, I assume, is coming out the day after this video goes live. If that's the case, great. We will sit down, we will review it, and we will be back here with you next week to review it. I know for a fact that main story number 3 is already out. It came out on the day before this video goes live. I know it did. I've seen it. And so that being said, hopefully that means that if next week we get to do Side Stories 1 and 2, then the week after we should be able to do Main Stories 3 and 4, as long as Main Story 4 releases this coming Wednesday, like it is supposed to. Like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So we will do our best. We will do everything that we can to be able to get this stuff to you when we can. I don't think that there is going to be a single person who is going to get into the comments of this video and be like, what the hell? You said you were gonna... Yeah. I don't envision that. It's literally never happened before. But I also don't appreciate being a liar.
You suck so much.
I also don't appreciate being a liar. So
I'm the one who goes onto our videos and types in how much you suck.
there was one person one time, which gave some people at our LGS a chuckle, our sponsor store, a chuckle. Because somebody came into one of our older opening videos where the camera work was not the best, but we've evolved our camera work drastically over the last 5 years, because that's how content works. But we've increased our or gotten better at our camera work for product openings. But somebody came into one of our videos a year after it came out and just wrote, "You suck," and moved on. First of all, I appreciate, but I do not need people to be like, "Joe, I'm so sorry that happened. That's terrible. They're the worst." No, it was hilarious. I loved every second of that. So that kind of stuff, I mean, like, maybe don't do that as a joke in our videos. That's not funny. But that particular thing, because it was a year later and it was on an old video, like out of nowhere, it just was very odd in that particular
in no way explained why we suck.
Just, you suck, moved on. Okay, fine, no worries.
You suck too, dude. Have a good life.
But yeah, so this, we will do everything that we can to be back next week to review Side Stories 1 and 2. We just need to have Side Story 2 exist first for us to read.
Yeah.
And then after that, we can do Side Stories 3 and 4 as long as Side Story 4 exists before that time. We will do everything that we can. We hope that all of you out there are continuing to stay safe and happy and healthy. That's you and yours. Please don't forget that in addition to that Monday stream that I mentioned earlier, we also stream on Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel. If you have that bell rung, you don't have to remember exactly when it is, because you will get a notification whenever we go live, whenever a new video comes out, etc. But this...
It's not hard to remember, but in case you don't.
Correct. Because, we remember it because, of course, we're doing it. But if it's something where, you can't do it one week or another week and then it goes out of your head, that notification is there for you to let you know we are going live.
Sometimes I forget until it's coming up real soon and I'm like, oh no.
We did that once.
Yeah.
We did that once. It was like
really close to the wire too.
Yeah. It was like 7:45 on a Monday, and we were like...
And we just realized...
Yeah, Amy was like casually making dinner, I'm messing around on the computer, and I was like, oh my god!
I literally had to stop making dinner, leave all of that food just out.
For 2 hours.
Not like out, but just like, I had to stop in the process of making dinner, and then I had to go back to actually making dinner again after we were done streaming. Yeah.
So those are the kinds of content creators we are. But seriously, we will be here the day after this video comes out. We will be here Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, playing the continuation and probably the finale of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. Last week was rough as hell, but I beat the Buu Saga, thank God. And so this week we are going to likely be finishing up the one-player story, the story mode, the Z Battle Gates, and then that will allow us the week after to go into Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2, which is one that I'm really, really looking forward to. So I hope that people will tune in for that. It is always a blast with Amy and I, to a degree, talking to people in chat. Yes. Chat is bumping during that time, so we really do appreciate it. In the Magic streams as well. And like I said, if and when there's information on early access, we will let you know. Right now, we have no idea. But stay tuned. Stay tuned to our videos, to the channel, to our socials down in the description box below. Check out our Video Games for All has 3 new videos a week coming out. You can see me fall in love with one of the dads on Dream Daddy this Sunday. So stay tuned for that. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
Please don't forget to leave your thoughts down in the comments below, because that is a great way, after reading this entirety of the Planeswalker's Guide to Strixhaven, it's a great way for you to show off your...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Join us in doing so. We hope you enjoyed this video. We would love to hear any opinions that you might have As always,
We do read them, we do respond to them if they require a response.
correct. Every single time. And so thank you in advance for doing so. Liking, sharing, etc. as well is super helpful. Thank you. But for now, or as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.